Resilience is the ability to persist over time.
In the Manila Bay and other bays that experience red tides, it is the marginalized that is affected in health and in economy.
The engineering is the ability to absorb, thrive, and then recover. The faster you're able to recover, the more resilient.
Sa Pilipino, ito ay katibayan at katatagan sa mahirap na sitwasyon at ang kakayahang bumangon muli.
Yung ecological naman, the ability to adapt. Yung evolutionary resilience, vale, to really innovate and be creative.
Resilience is really being able to spring back from adversity, but it should have learning, and therefore it strengthens you to be more resilient than before the adversity came to you.
Before COVID-19, the Philippines was already on to SMT-based measures to improve its resilience capacity. With COVID, the country was awakened to the need for resilience of our economic, health, and educational status as well.
The country as a whole is, I think, not so resilient because while we have the capabilities, the opportunities, and the resources to cope with COVID-19, the whole body is suffering because the leadership and management is not working so well. When it comes to individual resilience, those who have more resources, capabilities, and opportunities will be more resilient than those who are not.
A lot of the problems really may be interconnected, vale. You have to look at it from a holistic point of view. It encompasses more than natural sciences or physical problem, vale, but also it gets into the ecological, biological, as well as social pa nga.
Among issues and problems we have are poverty, ecosystem destruction, climate change, and bravery.
Much of our attention is placed only after the disasters happen. What we should do really is to take early action years before the hazard strikes, and we should put our attention and our resources into that type of planning.
We need SMT-based transdisciplinary and inclusive approach to coping with possible hazards.
The fragmentation of society needs to be resolved for resilience.
Communication is very, very important, and we should communicate to the people using not just scientific communication means, but through arts, music, understand the mindset of the Filipino people so we can communicate better.
Well, the way to move forward is interoperability.
So we have to do a lot of work as a person, as a community, and as an institution to really have resilience as one of the values of the Filipinos. Yung tunay na resilience na towards improvement.
Building resilience requires sustainability science inspired by transdisciplinary approach.
To be sustainable, you have to be resilient. To be resilient, you have to be sustainable.
Go natural, go with nature's flow. Non-structural or natural interventions, as well as good planning, is the most sustainable.
Finally, we need to harness and strengthen the Filipino spirit of bayanihan.
Pero dahil kami ay nasa academic,
Kailangan
pinag-aaralan natin
matingnan
yung
kung
mga...
ano talaga ang kailangan natin not only for ourselves, but for a people as a whole.
Resilience ng mga Pilipino towards the collective effort among communities
Not to blame anybody.
and the strengthening of
Resilience Live.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to our very special 23rd episode of Resilience Live. I'm FJ.
And I'm SJ, and we are your hosts for the 3rd anniversary episode. The Resilience Live webinar series is brought to you by the UP Resilience Institute NOAA Center.
3rd anniversary. Wow, Resilience Live has come a long way. So if this show were a person, they could already go to preschool. That is a milestone. What do you think about this, SJ?
Well, FJ, I certainly agree because being this the 3rd anniversary, it has really come this far, and it's kind of exciting knowing that we've hosted and produced this year's Resilience Live, and seeing everything comes together makes it all worth it.
And if you've already read the anniversary article we posted last August 7, you might already have a clue about our team's perspective.
And if you haven't, no worries. Our chat support has just set the link in the chat box, so you can check it out below.
Today is indeed very special. We have not one, but 2 episode guests for today. And we also have 3 trivia questions for our audience. The question topics are related to past episodes. Those first to answer correctly will have a chance to win a signed copy of Dr. Mahar Lagmay and Maria Criselda Baldagos' A Timeline of Mindanao Disasters. This book reminds the Filipino people of the threats of natural hazards and disasters in Mindanao, which are normally lost in the memory of younger generations. This book provides critical information that serves as basis for planning, vital for effective prevention and mitigation of disaster risk and overall resilience of communities.
That sounds fascinating, FJ. And for me, this book seems perfect for people to gain a deep understanding on community resilience. But before all that, let's take a moment to recognize our partners for this episode.
Kaway-kaway naman dyan. Wave to our partner organizations. Let's make some noise in the comments.
𝗝𝗄 Incorporated,
Angat Kalikasan, Pilipinas.
Association of Filipino Forestry Students, UPLB.
Association of Geologists and Geological Engineers of Mapua.
Association of Viscan Environmental Science Students.
Ateneo Institute of Sustainability.
Biology Society, LPU Laguna.
Center for Hazard and Environmental Resource Mapping, Southern Luzon State University.
Communities for Resilience Incorporated.
Cullion Foundation Incorporated.
Earth Island Institute, PH.
Ecolaya Environmental Advocates.
Environmental Science for Social Change.
Future Earth Philippines.
Geographic Society of the University of the Philippines.
Geological Organization of Partido State University.
Greenpeace Philippines.
Mapua Malayan Colleges Laguna.
United Architects of the Philippines.
UP Human Ecology Student Society.
UP Resilience Institute Youth Mappers.
UP Society of Human Settlements Planners.
UPLB INDREP.
Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines National Capital Region.
And UNESCO International Geoscience Program.
Without these partners, today's episode would not be possible.
And a round of applause for our loyal participants. And yes, that's right, it's you, the viewer. We would not have come this far without you guys.
Before we introduce our first speaker, we have our first question for our audience. So here are the instructions for answering. We will read the multiple choice questions first, and you have to wait for the chat support to type now. And once you know the answer and once now has been typed, type happy 3rd as fast as you can. And please, no commenting the answer itself. The first commenter will be called to say their answer. If their answer is wrong, we'll proceed with the second. And if their answer is wrong, we'll proceed with the third. Our chat support will contact the winner for their details. And there will be no repeat winners, so just only one winner of one copy of A Timeline of Mindanao Disasters.
So, here's the first question. Complete the quote by episode 19 speaker Dr. Joseph Pallas. Blank are never neutral. They carry the perspectives, politics, and power of those who can create them. Letter A, policies. Letter B, maps. Letter C, hazards. Or letter D, stories. What could be the answer here?
Let's wait. Let's wait for
Reminder, everyone.
reminders. Please type happy third, not the answers. And we have a first commenter, Christiana Bernabe. Please, you may unmute yourself. What is your answer?
The answer is letter A, policies.
Policies.
Is that correct, FJ?
Let's find out. No, the answer is not policies. We have 3 more options left. Let's proceed with the second commenter, Sean Angelo Guevara. Please, you may unmute yourself. What is the answer? Sean Angelo Guevara, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, Sean. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello, Sean. What is the
Hello.
answer?
The answer is B po.
B?
B as in boy?
Boy.
B as in dog.
Boy. B as in boy.
Okay.
Okay. Let's find out. Yes. The answer is B, maps. Being Dr. Palace a geographer, he says that maps are never neutral. They carry perspectives, politics, and power of those who create them. So congratulations, Sean. You'll receive a signed copy of Dr. Mahar Lagmay and Maria Griselda Baldagos, A Timeline of Mindanao Disasters. Our chat support will keep in touch with you.
Now, let's move on to the main event.
Our first guest for today is a multi-award winning applied agricultural economist, specializing in applied and action-oriented research for disaster risk reduction, non-market valuation of climate change adaptation strategies, and food systems transformation, with a strong emphasis on community-centered and evidence-based solutions.
She is currently a monitoring, evaluation, and learning associate at Resurgence. He holds a PhD in Applied Agricultural Economics and Policy from the University of Ghana, Legon, Accra, Ghana. With a strong portfolio of peer-reviewed publications and policy briefs, he has established himself as a thought leader in climate services, agricultural economics, and applied MEL.
His participatory and collaborative approach ensures that research and evaluation processes generate stakeholder-driven insights and locally relevant outcomes. Let's welcome Joseph Mansvera. Hello, Joseph.
Yeah, many thanks for those warm remarks. I think that's really great. And we are happy to be part of this wonderful event. So I think without further ado, let me share my screen. Yeah, so many thanks again for allowing us to come and speak at this fantastic event. So today I'm going to take it through beyond the forecast and looking specifically in terms of what really turns early warning information into action based on the lessons that we learned so far from our Daraja work in Africa and also in Asia. So I'll start with this reminder that people don't experience the focus, but they experience the hazards which affect their day-to-day activities, their day lives, and their livelihoods. And what we've seen so far in East Africa is that floods and extreme heat are the key hazards of concern to the residents, and these affect their livelihoods, especially those that live in informal settlements. And the same applies to South and Southeast Asia, where we see floods, cyclones, tornadoes, heat and drought, also affecting many residents in different cities and in different locations. So these hazards are the ones which really people experience, but not the forecast. And when the forecast is disseminated late, and the people do not really understand this forecast information. So these are the impacts which affect the communities. So when you're looking in terms of floods, what we have seen over time is that the residents indicate that flooding results in disease outbreak, especially those that are waterborne diseases. So like diarrhea, which I think is something that is very, very important impact to the residents. And we have seen property loss and damage, which really affect the residents. And we have seen that in some cases, because of infrastructure damage, for example, the roads becomes impassable or the bridges are being damaged. People fail to access the food markets, and it results in food shortages in their households. And so people are forced to displace from their houses because of the floods. And when you are looking in terms of heat, what we have seen over time is that there's a connection of heat and health, which I think is something that takes a significant toll to the residents again. And we have seen reduced productivity because of streaming, especially for those that works in open spaces. For example, those that operate a kiosk or a street side vending, which I think affect their livelihoods because most of them rely on daily income. So when this reduced productivity really takes a significant toll to their economic well-being. So we are seeing that there is the link between health and economic impact due to extreme heat. But also what we are seeing in the education sector is that extreme heat also reduces the comfort in the learning environments, and sometimes even leads to suspension of classes, which I think takes a significant impact, especially to those that are of school going age group. So what we have seen in terms of the connection between these impacts and the forecast is a communication gap, which I think it's cutting across both continents. And what we have seen is that the forecast is not often communicated in ways that allows people to take action. And where this focus information exists, or where the early warning system operates and the early warning system warnings are being disseminated, they often doesn't translate to action because of a challenge, a persistent challenge in effective early warning and a risk communication to the resident in a ways that allows them to understand and also to take action. And what we have seen also is that the people living with disability are often more vulnerable, despite the fact that they experience the same hazards like the people that do not have the disability, because we have seen some additional barriers to them, including lack of sign language, especially for television broadcasted focus information. There is no sign language interpretation for them, and also the visuals are not clear to them, and they face challenges to understand them, and sometimes there are no audio forecast that then the people living with hearing impairments, they're often being left behind. So these are some of the challenges they often face, and we have seen that the terminology that are being utilized to disseminate this focus information, they are not well understood, especially to the people that live with disability. So how do we then, as Daraja, bridge the gap? So what we do is that we start with the community through the co-production engagements, where the community voice sits at the center of the intervention. We co-design the focus information together with the communities and also with the local stakeholders, because we have to ensure that we address their needs and also we meet their preferences through this co-design, where their voices are being heard in the design of the focus and e-learning systems. And we ensure that we deliver downscaled focus information, which are pinned to location specific, then it becomes more relevant to the residents, and this allows them to take action. And we simplify the icons. This is something that's very, very important because it helps to simplify and reduce the cognitive burden and allows people to really understand the focus information, because some icons are really the residents find it difficult. So what we did through the co-production process and the code design process, we have to simplify these icons and enable people to understand the focus information at a glance. And what is very important, what we do is to ensure that the focus information is being disseminated in local dialects, because this allows everyone to understand the focus information and be able to take action despite the level of education. So local dialects, local language is very, very important in the dissemination of weather and climate information and the early warning messages. And so basically we ask the communities these 4 questions in terms of what do they really need, what kind of weather and climate information they need, and then we co-design that to meet their needs and their preference. So that's something that's very, very important, where the community voice sits at the center of the co-design activities, because the early warning system is supposed to be people-centered and community-owned. And we understand who do they trust, because this is very, very important, because that allows to work with the information ecosystem in which the people really, really trust, because the focused information is attached for them to take action is supposed to be trusted and come from trusted institutions and trusted channels or trusted people. And also we also understand to what extent do they understand this focus information, and then we try to understand what are the key enablers of the people to understand this focus information, and then we focus in terms of improving those key enablers of understanding. And also we try to understand their preference in terms of the channels, which channels do they really, really prefer for them to receive the focus information. And through this process, then what we then do is to utilize the channels the communities already use. So don't create parallel systems, but to embed within the existing system, because these are the trusted channels the communities want. For example, so what we then do, we also work with the schools and the youth champions, because this allows the communities, because they relate well with the communities, and then through this dissemination we'll be able to reach a large audience there. But also we use public spaces, the murals and creative campaigns, which I think allows people to access this information every day in their public spaces, and actually enables this information to be more visual for them to understand it and also to relate with the information. And what we do also is that we co-design what we call community election plans, because this is something that's very, very important, because it gives the community the information, the practical advice in terms of what exactly are they supposed to do. For example, if floods or heat are being anticipated, so we sort of co-design this with communities, and then we showcase, for example, if flood are being anticipated, people understand the evacuation route they're supposed to take, and safe places where they can sort of evacuate to, and also what are the action they can take to reduce the loss and damage that are also associated with extreme weather events. And we leverage on the community-based system, for example, the loudspeakers, the megaphone, because these are the trusted channels the communities already use. So this is something that helps people to understand the focus information, because this the community radios, for example, or the loudspeakers, they send this focus information through local dialects. Then that helps people to relate with the information, and also because they already trust these systems, so they actually act upon that focus information. And we also engage local voices, what we call community climate champions, because these live within the communities. So when they disseminate and relate this focus information to the communities, it allows them to really take action, because they live within the communities and they are able to disseminate the focused information again in local dialects, which allows people to understand the focused information. And they also create a feedback loop, which allows continuous improvement in the focused information delivery. And again, because of improvement that has been happening over time due to technology, we also utilize trusted digital systems, particularly which based on their preferences. For example, what we have seen over time is that the social media channels that are also trusted and preferred, for example, in Kampala, it's WhatsApp, and also what we've seen in Nairobi and Dar-es-Salaam in Sudan, we've seen that people prefer the SMSs and they trust the SMS. So we also leverage on that technology, and then Telegram in Addis Ababa, for example. So we also try to make sure that we disseminate this information through these trusted social media channels, which are contextualized because from one city to the other, people prefer different channels. So that's what exactly we look at based on the evidence that comes through, for example, from our baselines and also continuous community engagement. We then understand what are the preferred channels and what are the needs, and then we co-design together with the communities there. So an early warning system only lasts if people and institutions own it. So like I said, what is very, very important is to ensure that the system is people and community centered, and the community owns this system, because that allows them to trust the focus information and act upon the early warning information that is being disseminated through those early warning systems. So we have to co-design together with the communities, where the community voice sits at the center of the interventions. And we work with local partners, because these local partners are already trusted within their communities, which is something that's very, very important, because we have to ensure the trust, because trust equals to people translate this focus information into their day-to-day activities. And we have to ensure that the national media agencies are being engaged early in the co-design activities, for them to get to understand what exactly the communities are asking for, and they deliver that through the co-design processes. So I just want to take you through 5 things that we have learned so far from our director work in East Africa. So number 1, language matters. Language is very, very important. So when focused are being disseminated, it's very, very important to disseminate the focus information in early warning system in local dialects, because this allows people to understand and then take action despite the level of education. So if we disseminate the focus information in local dialects, it's something that's really important for people to take action. So that's what we focus on. We deliver the focus information through local languages in each country that we work in. And we have to work with the media agencies to make to downscale the focus information to become location specific, because this matters in terms of ensuring that it's relevant to the residents' location and their areas. Because what we often see most of the time when we ask, why did you act upon the information that we received, most of the people indicate that it was not relevant to my location. So there's a real demand for location specific focus information that allows people to understand what is going to happen within their locations. And number 3, we simplify the icons. So this is something that is very, very important, where the simplified icons reduce the cognitive burden and allows people to understand the early warning information and allows them to take action. And like I said, it is very, very important to ensure that the community voice sits at the center of the co-design process. So we co-design with the communities, and the intervention that we come with is owned by the people, and it's owned by the community, and it's trusted by the community, and this translates to election. And we have to make sure that we use trusted channels, and again, we develop the community elections, which allows the community to understand what are the practical action they can take if, for example, floods or heat are being anticipated. And when we use trusted channels to disseminate that advice, it allows them to take action. For example, utilization of community radios, which are very, very important in the dissemination of focus information, and also trusted social media channels. This allows people to really understand the focus information and then take action to reduce the loss and damage that are associated with climate change. And now, what we are now asking in Asia is that we are currently in the process of understanding what the preference of the communities are, because we are yet to have a intervention in Asia, but we have already started to map out in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in India, and we do preliminary analysis to understand the preference the communities really want. So what we've seen in terms of the channels, the communities were asking for dissemination of the focus information through social media, particularly Facebook and WhatsApp, which I think is very, very important for us to understand that. And also the television is also something that they indicated, which is very, very important because there is the need for the visuals. So what we have now do is to ensure that they also ask, especially the people living with disability, for those television broadcasts to ensure that there is sign language interpreter, which then helps them to understand the focus information. And also they ask something that's very, very important, which is similar also across East Africa, is that they asked for community-based systems. For example, the utilization of megaphone, because this allows them to trust the focus information, and it's easier for them to access these channels. So it's something that's very important, what we've seen both in East Africa and also in Asia. And also in India in particular, they asked for focus information to be disseminated through the ratio drivers, which I think is something that's very important because they relate to them and it allows them to trust the focus information and be able to understand it and then take action. Then in terms of the focus information itself,
It seems Joseph has is facing technical difficulties as of the moment. All right, let's wait for a moment for Joseph to present once again. But so far, I really appreciate what Joseph has been presenting with regards to the Raja program by Resurgence. I think it's very important that our disaster resilience responses not only have like technology or novel projects. What's also important is how we communicate it with our communities, since it really depends on how the community responds to, or they're able to execute their disaster response. And usually that's just as simple as making our instructions on how to carry out our disaster resilience projects accessible and understandable to the common person.
Indeed, FJ, I certainly agree because what I realized with the Daraja program is actually making the community inclusive in disaster response. And with the lessons that Joseph shared so far from East Africa and the Asia.
Yeah.
Yes, these are very insightful because they have gathered on the ground data from the people themselves in the community. So I think this is very helpful and relevant, especially nowadays that different hazards come and go.
Right. And I actually most appreciate with Joseph's presentation, the way they use the channels. They use like other, like, messaging apps, our simple messaging apps that we use every day. They're vital for disaster resilience response. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a big, government project. It just has to be as simple as having your communities, your networks, for actually communicating with each other in the manner that they're most familiar with, right?
Well, FJ, with the given presentation of Joseph, these channels that communities already use are indeed impactful for their people because they already know how to communicate with them, how to get their insights, how to get their feedback, and actually gain more observation on what's happening in their surroundings.
Right. Let's wait for a moment again for Joseph to proceed with the presentation.
Yes, and of course, after this presentation, there's also two more questions incoming.
Yeah, 2 more chances to win a timeline of Mindanao disasters by Dr. Lagmay and Griselda Baldago.
Joseph, hello. Hello, Joseph. Can you hear us?
All right, let's wait for Sir Joseph to sort out the technical difficulties. We'll be right back.
It seems that Joseph hasn't come back yet. So let's proceed first with the second trivia question. So participants, get ready. Read the instructions again on how to answer and please type happy third after our chat support has chat now.
Yes, and please do not type the answer itself, whether it be the word or the letter to the answer. Just type happy third.
Yes, and no repeat winners, okay? First commenter will be called to say their answer. FJ?
Okay, for a second question. From the second anniversary episode about urban resilience featuring architect, environmental planner, 𝗍𝙗𝙗 𝙍𝙗𝙗, and Dr. Nathaniel von Einsiedel, what is the first settlement in Makati? A. Tejeros, B. Poblacion, C. Guadalupe, or D. Santa Ana? Please wait for Ella Santiago to say happy third.
I think we have someone who chatted happy third first. Neil Given Dimagiba, you may now unmute yourself.
What is the first settlement in Makati?
Hello, I think the answer is B, Poblacion.
Poblacion. Is it Poblacion? Feel ko it's one Ayala. Or
well, my money was on letter E.
Yeah, let's find out. Yes, the answer is B, Poblacion. Congratulations to Neil for answering it correctly. You'll receive a signed copy of Dr. Mahar Lagmay and Maria Criselda Baldagos, A Timeline of Mindanao Disasters. Our chat support will keep in touch with you and just send the appropriate details so we can send the book to you.
Okay, congrats again, Neil. Now, on with the show. Our next guest.
We proceed with the. Is Joseph still here? Okay. He is not. Okay. We'll proceed with the second speaker.
Okay. Our next guest is the Director of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at Resurgence, where she leads the organization's business development function.
She brings a decade of commercial leadership and operations experience across Asia Pacific to the challenge of scaling climate resilience following a career transition from pharmaceutical healthcare into climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction.
She has secured £800,000 in innovation funding, led multi-year programs, and built strategic partnerships with the World Bank Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, as well as with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and Red Cross Climate Center, helping move early warning and resilience solutions from pilots towards scale across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean.
Her work sits at the intersection of commercial strategy, climate resilience, and institutional partnerships, connecting the organizations, resources, and relationships needed to turn locally grounded solutions into systems that last. Let's welcome Jennifer Joy Gather.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone who are here today. I want to first thank the UP Resilience Institute for inviting Resurgence to be part of your 3rd anniversary episode. And in particular, I think it is really a great space where the science, policy, and community practice can meet. So I think Joseph's presentation earlier has taken us through the design of the Raja, how the service works, and what it takes for the information to be trusted, to be understood, relevant, and actionable. Now, I am here to give you a complementary angle to the question that we're trying to answer here, which is, what does it actually take to make a people-centered early warning last? So where I'm picking up would be a slightly different question to how Joseph has presented. Because what happens after a pilot has worked, or what happens whether we've proven that something has worked? Or what happens when the project team leaves, when the grant ends, or when we take the approach somewhere else where there are different institutions, different relationships, and communication channels, and that are totally different from the original intervention. So that's really what I want to talk to you today, to understand what are the ways in which we can successfully scale something. Next slide, please. So a warning that works once is not yet a system, because a pilot proves that it can work, but a system decides whether it will last. Because I think everyone here today, we know that in resilience work, proving that something works is obviously very important. But we need evidence, and we need to know that the intervention makes sense and that the people are truly benefiting from it. But I think that still leaves a pretty difficult question on who carries it, on whose job is it, where does it fit in the institution, and which budget line pays for it, and who is accountable when the original project team leaves. So I think that's the bit that I've been calling it as the institutional middle. That is between the proof and the adoption. And we've started thinking about that in 4 steps. So first is proof. Can this actually work here? Then connect. Who has the mandate, the relationships, and reach to carry it? And then embed. Where does it actually live? In which workflow, in which policy or budget line or responsibility? And finally, sustain. What keeps it going after the grant ends? And I think this is where the scaling gets interesting, because a pilot is very good at answering the first question of whether it works. But scaling it depends on the other 3. And I think from my own personal experience, having worked from the pharmaceutical commercial roles to now urban resilience, has taught me a way of asking or assessing good evidence. What is good evidence? Not only is it technically sound, but also does it align with the policy frameworks or the institutional mandates in the context where we're working? Or does it reduce the cost of the investment in the long term? Whose decision does it change? Whose workflow does it matter? And who is accountable for it once the project original pilot funder leaves? So that is, I think, what I'm bringing with my experience in terms of, I call it as the adoption lens, because I am not saying that we should treat the communities as a market. And I think that's very far from it. It is about creating a discipline for how we look at evidence and build it for a sustained use for communities. And in early warning, I truly believe that science is absolutely essential. But once the forecast exists, the question then becomes, do the institutions exist to carry it, have the capabilities to help or to deliver that to the people who need it most? Next slide, please. Okay, so what does it look like in practice? So we have, as Joseph has mentioned earlier about the Raja, we have started piloting it in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, and then brought it to Kampala and Addis Ababa, and more recently into Sudan, where we have actually co-designed a national early warning service in a conflict-affected context. Now, as you can see, and I think from our experience, we have seen that the principles of the Raja has traveled, but the delivery arrangements were different because there were different institutions, there were different relationships that has to be built, different languages, and different ways of communicating. In Kampala, WhatsApp was more important. In Addis, it was Telegram, and in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, it was SMS, which played an important role. So the lesson for here is that not one channel is better than the other. Rather, if the channel follows the local reality. Because for us, scaling is not replication. It is not just a copy-paste that if one project is successful, that you can transfer it immediately. It is more like a negotiation repeated in every new city and increasingly in every new context. So every time we enter a new context, the questions we ask is, who owns the problem? Who has the relationships? What information is actually useful? And how should it travel? How should it be delivered in order for the communities can act on it? Next slide, please. This is, I guess, like an image that is one from our early action planning workshops in Dar es Salaam. And I think it shows clearly what I've been talking about, which is that the work of scaling doesn't really happen in project offices or in a forecast center. It happens in rooms like this, where you can have the communities, the local partners and institutions working alongside each other to understand what the information means to them, who needs it, and what decision is supposed to happen in order to make it better. Next slide, please. And this is probably the point that I want to make to support the evidence that we've shown you about the Raja, which is that partnership is not something that we add around the service, because partnership is the service. Because no single organization have all the capabilities you need. So we have the National Met Services, they have the mandate, they have the official forecast, and authority that makes a warning channel legitimate. Then you have the local civil society and delivery networks. They have the relationships with the communities, so they bring the reach and the trust. And then this is also where the inclusion becomes practical. It is not enough that we say we are reaching cities. We have to think about who is actually being reached, whether the communication is accessible, and whether the people who are most at risk can use that information in their day-to-day lives. And then third, communities. They obviously bring something very important, which is their needs, their languages, their decisions, and as well as their feedback about whether the service actually works for them or serves them. And fourth are the funders and the scalers. They bring the resources, and ideally, they also bring the patience to fund some of the institutional work that doesn't look very exciting in any project log frame or delivery milestone. Because when you have a funder and an implementer, that doesn't automatically mean that it is already a partnership. If the actor with the mandate isn't there, then the pilot can strand. Or if the delivery network isn't there, the warning may never reach the people who needs it. And if the inclusion expertise is gone or missing, the service may systematically leave people out. And if communities aren't involved, or they're treated as just recipients rather than part of the design and the feedback loop of the intervention, then the service loses its relevance. And finally, if nobody asks what happens after the project funding ends, then the whole thing can become dependent on the project. And it could potentially just end after the funding finishes. So when we talk about the partnership, we're not talking about something that we add around the service. We're talking about it as being one of the core components of making the pilot move from the initial stage to successfully scaling it to other areas. Next slide, please. So does it actually work? And I think our short answer here is we have seen meaningful improvements across the context that we have worked in and where the Raja was implemented. So as you can see that in terms of access to warnings, in Kampala, it went from 60 to 93%. In Nairobi, it went from 56 to 93%. In Dar es Salaam, from 74 to 93%. And Sudan, from 39 to 60%. And additionally, we also saw some improvements in the use of warnings for early action across these four contexts. But what I want to first note here is that these are all data, self-reported data from our baseline to endline household findings across 4 of these countries. So they show the change in the access and the use, but they are not obviously a perfect causal evaluation, nor is it presenting any independent verification. But what I want you to see from this data is that how the context sets the ceiling. Because if scaling is all about copy and pasting it 10 times across different cities, then we would probably see a very uniform result. But we don't see it here, because what is one of the most instructive result here for us is about Sudan, where we have implemented the same approach, the same disciplined approach, but it can land differently, because first Sudan, knowing that it has a conflict-affected setting, but it also depends on the connectivity, the institutional access, conflict conditions that exist, the trust, and obviously the amount of time available for building relationships. And that's why I think that an evidence like this is most useful, because it not only answers our question of whether the pilot works, but it also helps us to provide information to assess whether an institution decides what to keep, what needs changing, where to invest, and if the conditions simply aren't right yet for scaling. Next slide, please. And given all that, I think we've started asking ourselves, every time we look at expanding it to another city, 5 simple questions before we pursue the partnership. So first is, who actually owns the problem? Because if nobody owns it, then who's going to keep it going once we leave? Second, does it actually fit into the institution? So where does it sit? Which team, which workflow, and which budget line? Third is about delivery capacity. So who really reaches the community? So this is, for us, one of the most important and challenging things that we have to look at, because we have to find the right partner, the right delivery partner for this, because they have to have the trust and access to the communities to be able to reach those who truly needs support. And because if a warning is just sitting somewhere, it's not going to be very useful if it doesn't get to the person who truly needs it. That's why for us, choosing and finding the right delivery partner is of critical importance. And then fourth, it's about financial sustainability. So we have to ask who pays for it when the project ends, because we know that project funding tends to be more short-term. It can last like 1, 2, or 3 years. So what happens after that? And that's sometimes the most uncomfortable question. So when we start any partnership, because that's something that we truly need to understand, who is truly the one who can make that decision and who can actually activate the right funding for it to make it sustainable. And then finally, local ownership. So this is just thinking about what builds local capacity in order to build local ownership. Or are we creating, because we don't want to create another dependency on an external project or organization? And I think this last point, the local ownership, is particularly important for an organization like Resurgence, because all of these questions to us are very useful. And also, it gives us the opportunity to say no. And if several answers to these questions are no, then maybe it gives us the opportunity to redesign the partnership or build and strengthen the missing relationships. And sometimes it could be one where we don't have to proceed in building that partnership. And using these 5 tests has helped us build a good partnership discipline. And it is still an ongoing process. It is also it's obviously challenging when you have like strategic priorities, but also what the reality on the ground truly is like. And for Resurgence, success should mean that the institutions and the partners around the service become more capable of sustaining it. If a project can be technically excellent and still be a poor candidate for scaling. Because if nobody has the mandate, the workflow, and the budget, or ownership to carry it forward, then it's not going to scale. So before asking, can we scale this? I think we should ask, who will own it if it works? Next slide, please. And this is the other thing that we've learned through our 8 years of work in the Raja. It is that alignment work takes time and costs money. And that problem is not always very visible, because you can always show an early warning product, you can show a dashboard or even a workshop, but it is much harder to show the value of the months spent in agreeing who owns the problem, in aligning the roles, the data, the workflows, building the relationships before the decision have to be made, and even working out what happens after the grant. That invisible work can determine whether the visible part of the project can survive. So to me, this is actually a risk decision. It is asking ourselves whether do we invest in alignment now when the opportunity is relatively small, or do we accept a much higher risk of creating a technically successful project, but it is institutionally stranded pilot later? Because not every pilot needs to scale. And sometimes the right approach is just saying no, particularly if the institutional conditions aren't right. And that's, I think, is a useful evidence as well. And I think every pilot should be able to answer the question, who owns it if it works? Because that is one way of being able to proceed to scaling it in other contexts. Next slide, please. So this is just a journey that we've seen across East Africa, from Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, Kampala, Addis, and into Sudan more recently. And the lesson that we take from our journey is not that we have a model ready to export in all the other regions. The lesson is that we've developed a better way of asking questions about whether, where, and how an approach might be a better fit. And I think that's the same mindset that we're bringing into Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Now, let me bring this a little bit closer to home, the Philippines. And the one thing that I want to be clear is that we are at the very early stage in the Philippines when we don't have any agreement, no MOUs, no program, and nor are we ready to announce anything in the Philippines. And in fact, if I say something that we have something to offer you right now, that would go much against everything that I've been talking about. Because the Philippines already has strong institutions, has a long history of disaster risk reduction and management. There's the PAG-ASA, there's a strong DRRM system, and even the LGUs have a lot of experience when it comes to early warning and early action. So the question isn't, how do we bring the Raja to the Philippines? The question for us is there actually a gap in the system where this approach could add value? And I think that's a very different question, because that's where our current work is really about relationship building and scoping to truly understand and listen for where a people-centered early warning approach could genuinely complement what already exists. We want to understand what's already working, what has already been tried, what are the gaps, and whether there's a role for a people-centered approach that genuinely complements what's already there. So our sequence is very simple. So we listen, we align, we co-design, we test, and we decide. In that order, no, not the other way around, because we don't want to arrive with a ready-made East African model. And we don't want to ask Philippine institutions and communities to fit themselves into it, because we believe that the Philippines has a different context, different institutions, different communities, different relationships, and different constraints. So we believe that the East African context gives us evidence and the lessons, but it will not give us the permission to assume the answer. Next stage, please. So this is what an early stage, I guess, co-designing experience looks like in practice. Listening, understanding the institutional landscape, learning from people who already know the context. And that may sound simply as, sound slower than launching a project. Because if the goal is something that actually lasts, that early investment can reduce the risk of building the wrong thing. Next slide, please. So if you can take one question from this presentation into your next partnership conversation, I would suggest what has been tried here and what did not work. We have to first, before we arrive with a solution or any intervention, we want to understand what's already known. So what are the constraints you're dealing with? What didn't work and why? And then you name the gap. Where there is a gap in community reach, in co-production, or evidence. And then identify what is genuinely missing. And then you test. One small, feasible pathway with the right partners. Not a program, not an MOU, not a big commitment, just one gap that's worth solving together. So, because there's always a lot of pressure in resilience work to move quickly, and that need is real, but moving quickly sometimes can lead us to the wrong intervention and can even create its own set of risks. Sometimes the fastest route to a sustainable solution is to slow down and listen. And sometimes even the highest value conversations turn up if we build on those relationship building first, right before we've even designed the intervention. So listen carefully. We have to understand the system and finding the right actors. Then we test something small. Next slide, please. So from pilots to systems, the goal is to build the partnerships that allow people-centered early warning last. Because better forecasts matter, but better connected institutions are what can help those forecasts keep creating value. And that's the key lesson that we've learned and we're taking from the Raja. It's not a perfect model. It's a set of principles and relationships, the institutional fit, delivery reach, and financing and local ownership. That is the work that we're trying to carry forward across different contexts, carefully and without assuming that what worked in one city will work in another. Because a pilot proves that something can work, but it's a system that decides whether it keeps working. So to me, the scaling question is simply, can we do more of this? But rather, what has to be true for this to become part of the system? And next slide, please. And now, before I leave, I want to leave you with one question. Which actor is missing in your partnership architecture? Is it the institution with the mandate? Is it the organization with the community reach? Is it the people whose decisions the service is supposed to support, or is the funder willing to finance the alignment work? So, because if we identify that missing actor early, then maybe we can design the partnership differently before we design the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, JJ, for that wonderful presentation on the Raja's journey in scaling early warning system initiatives in East Africa. More than just the need for developing technology and systems for disaster preparedness, there's a need for developing technology and systems for disaster preparedness. There is a need for building relationships and exploring partnerships for effective resilience practices. The Raja's framework for building partnerships is something institutions and organizations can follow. It is important that we learn to adjust our projects to the diverse needs of stakeholders. Solutions aren't just one size fits all. Countries have different socio-political, economic, and even cultural factors. Some countries will have distinct organizations and institutions that carry the necessary mandate for undertaking disaster responses. You have to take that into consideration. And these institutions have a particular workflow and particular budget allocations that you have to work with. Some countries, they face internal conflicts that impact the speed of responses. Other countries overwhelmingly prefer a particular application for communication for early warning information. Taking note of these particular realities is important in determining worthwhile partnerships for disaster response. And a successful partnership for disaster responses undertaken by the Raja program is made possible by early actions that are understood, trusted, relevant, actionable, and owned by the communities themselves. All right. I'm sure everyone's just dying to ask their questions. So at this point, we will be opening our floor to our attendees.
Okay, participants, you may now press the react button to raise your hand and wait for us to call your name. And you may unmute yourselves before speaking. And if you are too shy to use the mic, we will also entertain questions sent to the chat box. Okay?
And we have a raised hand here from 𝗍𝙗𝙀𝗵. Please, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much to Dr. Joseph and JJ for the insightful presentations. And this is actually not a question, but I just want to share my insight. Since we're talking about early warning systems being, or it should be actionable. And I just remember the case of Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda in back in 2013. And it was infamous for killing a lot of Filipinos in Tacloban, and for causing storm surge that flattened communities and cost around 2 billion in damages. And I just read a report in 2014 from GIZ about the event, and they highlighted a finding which mentioned that hazard warnings during that time were actually issued days in advance to allow communities to prepare and to allow the people to evacuate. And so it was good that the information was relayed to the communities days prior, but that some people actually blamed the media and also the scientists that used terminologies that were not very familiar to the locals, such as storm surge. At that time, storm surge was not a common hazard, so it actually caused confusion among the people, and the report blamed that part because since they are using technical words, the people did not understand, and so they did not take the recommendation seriously. And another angle from the report was that some of the evacuation centers in that area was actually found to be located in the areas where the storm surge was about to hit. And so the people who have evacuated in those evacuation centers were obviously affected by the projected storm surge, which was very unfortunate. So I just realized that based on this, we can really say that clear communication and accurate information should go hand in hand, especially in developing early warning systems. So I like what our two presenters have shared this afternoon, and this is also a lesson from for us as people from the academy. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to prevent these kinds of disasters in the future. So thank you so much for your presentations.
Okay, thank you, Arch, for that manifestation on the presentations of JJ and Joseph.
Yes. And we have a question here. First question in the chat is from Eric Lopez. Speakers, this question is for both of you. How do you ensure and monitor community early action after the issuance of early warning information?
Yeah, I can pick that one. Maybe JJ will come in if she has something to add. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and I think looking at it, it's asking some kind of practical ways of monitoring the election after issuance of early warning information. So I think that's something that's very important. So usually, what then happens is that there is always a command center, especially when it's a extreme weather event, with the command center with a multi-stakeholder system there, where the warning is being issued, and within the different locations, there are always people who work within that system to always provide feedback in terms of, for example, monitoring the rivers or monitoring the situation on the ground, and they provide feedback to the command center. So usually that happens with, for example, in the commonly alerting protocols. But what is very important now in terms of the community, for example, in the informal settlements, where sometimes they are often not reached with these formal institutions and so forth. So what is very important is to have the local leaders who you work with within those communities, and then maintain a two-way communication system where you always receive the feedback, and ensuring that you keep monitoring the situation and advise further practical information based on the evolving situation within that community. And what then happens is that usually there is after event evaluation, where you then check the effectiveness of the warning. What was the main barrier for people to take action? For example, do the people really receive the information the way that you wanted them to do? And how many people, for example, took action, and what was more effective? So you often do the after event evaluation. But of course, I think in a broader sense, when we are looking in terms of the project, when the focus information is being disseminated in that context, we often do end-line evaluation to understand, for example, how many people have accessed the focus information, and how many people utilize that information. So it depends with the level and the type of forecast that has been disseminated. So if it's in like in a extreme weather event warning, we often you go through the formal systems, which I think through the command center, where they often have people on the ground to continue to monitor the situation. But if it's in a project setup, then you can do an after event evaluation. Immediately after the event, then you can assess the barriers, the challenges that have been faced, and how people utilize that focus information and areas to improve in the next event. But in a project also, you can do inline evaluation to understand how many people have been reached with the focus information and how many people utilize that information. So it depends with the context there. So I can stop here for now. Thank you.
JJ, do you have something to add for a question?
Yeah, I think to us, the warning is not exactly the endpoint because it's the action. And so we tend to monitor three things. We obviously start as, the evidence we've showed, we have baseline to end line. And the three things that we monitor is, did people receive the information? Did they understand it? And did they act after receiving it? But at the same time, what we've also done through the Raja is integrating the feedback loop in the system, because that then helps us in preparing them and determining or getting used to how early action is done after they receive the information. Because sometimes it could also tell you whether the problem that they have may not necessarily be about awareness. It could be they don't have a safe option. They don't have the means or the resources to do it. And so by asking these questions, we also try to understand, if they didn't act, what was the reason for it, to help us better understand what can we actually evolve or change in the current system, in the current process, in order for them to improve that, to basically take away or to help them address all the other barriers that they're encountering on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you, JJ and Joseph. We have a raised hand here from April Tagalan. Miss April?
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Hi. I'd like to answer JJ's question earlier about what's missing in the partnership architecture, something like that. I'd like to answer that in the context of the Philippines and from the perspective of UPRI. In the country, I guess most of us would know that we have plenty of hazard data producers. We do not lack for sources of early warnings in the Philippines. The thing is that because of the myriad of data producers, some sort of confusion arises because sometimes there are conflicting information or data from different data producers. So in a way, it corrodes this kind of fragmentation corrodes the trust and understanding of the public that's supposed to understand those information. So I guess what's missing in this whole ecosystem is something or somebody that would unify those information so that it can be processed into something that's better for communicating, that would generate less confusion. And that would come before all the localization and the contextualization. There has to be someone that would do that. But then, given this, I'd like to pivot back to Joseph's presentation earlier. I heard and saw the trust is a huge factor when you're doing an early warning system. The data source should be trusted by the community. My question is, have you ever encountered in all your experience where the community is a bit less trusting than ideal towards the data source? And if that happens, what could be done about that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, indeed. So I think, yes, indeed, trust is something that's very important. It's a key ingredient in this early warning system, because that allows people to take action. Yeah, I think we often ask the residents, usually in terms of the trust component. So what usually came through is that the information, especially when it is being disseminated through social medias, sometimes they indicate that they didn't take action because they don't trust the source. So that's what we then do is to then understand what do their preferences are. And when we understand their preferences, then we utilize the channels they prefer and the channels they trust. So that's how we sort of bridge the trust gap there. So through our baseline research, what we do is we ask the communities in terms of which channels do they trust, and we then ask them again, and which channel do they prefer. So there is always a correlation between the channel they trust and the channel they prefer. And then through the co-design processes, then we then identify the key priority channels they trust, and then we sort of utilize those ones to disseminate the focus information. Because once you continue to do the traditional way of disseminating the focus information, then definitely they will not trust that and they will not take action. But when you understand the preferred and the trusted channels and then utilize those ones, you see that when you integrate that community voices and their needs and their preference, they are able to trust the system they co-develop. So co-production with the communities and the co-design of the channels with the communities is something that's very, very important, that helps to bridge the trust gap. So you have to co-design the communities, because once they co-design, they own the system and they trust the system. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, speakers. And I hope, April, your question has been answered. Okay, before we proceed to the next question, we would like to encourage the participants to ask questions in the chat box, or you can use the mic to unmute yourself. Okay, we have a question here from the Q&A box. Hello, thank you, speakers, for the insightful presentation. My question is for JJ. What strategies ensure ownership transfer from external partners to local institutions?
It is like kind of the heart of what we do is co-designing. So we first have to identify who are the key stakeholders in the system, from the data provider to the data user. And spending that time that I called earlier the institutional middle, spending that time to understand what each stakeholder does and what kind of decisions they are responsible for and do, helps us to then engage them in the process of co-design, to ensuring that there is a representative of the voice needed for each part of the system in the workshops that we do, in the co-design workshops, to truly understand what are the missing factors, or if the forecasts are really good, but then communities still don't take action, then actually assessing what is that gap in the system. If the forecast, if there are so many resources available, but still people do not take action, then that's a more important thing that we have to ensure that the key stakeholders are represented. And so it is also important that when we engage with institutions or even other organizations, we try to kind of build a relationship that will then have someone who is like a supporter in each organization. Because having climate champions, having the Raja champions will help the process smoother, because they are the ones sometimes in our experience, they are the ones who are actually more proactive and sharing information and engaging. And if there is any problem or challenges, then through the champions that we have across the different stakeholders, they have, they help build the system and become better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, JJ. We have a question here from the YouTube comment section. Hi, I guess this goes for both speakers. What is one piece of advice for a resource-limited local government unit looking to strengthen its early warning system? Anybody would like to go first?
Do you want to go first, Joseph, or me? I don't mind.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I can
that's
go.
okay, JJ. You can
Yeah.
go first. Yeah, that's fine.
I think if you have limited resource, it's still going to, first is without spending too much, kind of like identifying who are the, like key decision makers in the system. And that you can take from just sitting in front of a computer and doing a research. And then second is obviously the very important thing is going to the communities, because there's a lot of information that cannot be found online. And you can only learn from that to what communities actually experience when you speak to them. So we have, I think, before we even go to doing a pilot, sometimes we start with much more basic process where we kind of understand the information ecosystem. And there's a cost for that, but obviously not the same amount as implementing a pilot, and then before that, the full implementation. But at least when you understand the ecosystem, how the information flows from the data provider to the community user, then you can understand what ways can you improve, and then determine from there what are the key needles that you can move, particularly when funding is not there, when you are a very resource constrained organization or team. So I think it's important to first have the information and then verify that information with the communities and also your other colleagues in the sector who might be able to share information with you. Joseph, do you want to share?
Yeah, many thanks, JJ. I think that's really on spot. And I think maybe just a footnote to what JJ said, especially when we are looking in terms of the information ecosystem. So I think given the resource constraint factor there, I think it is very important to utilize the channels that are low cost, especially the dissemination side of things. So working with the local leaders within the communities is something that's very important because it's likely to be lower cost. And you can also try to use the megaphones, because I understand that these are low cost channels that can reach a wider audience and which are also trusted. And again, I think establishing, for example, the maybe the Facebook accounts, where these social medias, which are of course trusted by the communities. So you have to understand, like JJ said, that you have to go to the community and understand what they prefer, their preferences are. So you can utilize these channels which are low cost, but also help to reach a wider audience. I think that's something that you can also try to consider from the understanding the information ecosystem, how it operates, and which are the low cost and the low hanging fruits that you can sort of leverage on. Yeah. So I can just say at that point. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, speakers, for your answers. I hope that answers the question of the anonymous chat. Okay, now let's proceed with another question. From the Q&A box, my question is for both speakers. In Nepal's recent mudslide, how does Nepal's experience illustrate that scaling is negotiation, not replication, especially in hazard-prone mountainous regions? Any speaker may go first.
Yeah, I can answer. First, we actually experienced that quite a lot, where there's obviously competing priorities between different actors, from institutions to the community partners, delivery partners. But I think that tension is something that it's just a reality. We have to acknowledge it. We have to, it's like in co-designing, we have to put everyone in the same room, or at least try to engage them in a way where they can listen. We can listen to each other to understand what are their strategic priorities and where they are right now and where they want to get to then try to see what could be a halfway for them to agree on certain things. Because as we said, the Raja is not a ready-made model that we export. It is a set of principles. So it is about truly building the relationship, building the trust for each actor to become part of the early warning system. And even if, say, the community wants something, but we don't have the institutional actor involved, then that might just end up, as a pilot stalling. So that's why it is still important that even if it's a difficult conversation, we have to try to engage with it, because that's also where honesty comes in terms of what truly are the gaps and challenges that each actor are experiencing.
Okay. Joseph, do you have a response to the question of Nepal's experience illustrating how scaling is negotiation, not replication?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I don't have a full understanding in terms of what was the experience was, but I think just like what JJ mentioned earlier in the presentation is that where the scaling, you don't have to, it's not a copy and paste in some context. So what you have to do is to understand the realities within that particular context, and then you customize it to fit within that. Because otherwise, if you just take everything as it is in the initial sort of, for example, what we indicated that we are just not taking what we learned from East Africa and exactly put it as it is in Asia, but we are understanding the needs within different particular contexts, and then we customize it. So that's something that is very, very important, to customize the system so that it fits within that particular context, and then leverage existing system, and you don't need to create the parallel ones. So it's something that's very important, and ensuring that you work with the trusted systems or the trusted channels there, that is then going to help to sort of sustain that system, because it is being owned by the communities and it addresses the specific needs and the realities in that particular context. So I think understand the context and customize the system is very, very important. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's also really important, of course, to reiterate that we have to really understand the situation first, especially with something as recent as the Nepal mudslide, right? It's a very, when did it happen? It just happened like
hours
today,
ago.
right?
I saw the news.
Right. Yeah, and I think we still have to figure out, or we still have to learn so much about what happened in Nepal in order to also have proper response to what happened to that tragedy. And I believe we have another question from the chat box. In the lifespan so far of the work of Resurgence, co-creation, were there any previous experience where local stakeholders have opposite priorities or interests? And what ways were these differences reconciled? And are these approaches the same across the space and time that you have worked on in Africa?
Yeah, that's a mouthful question. I think that's interesting to get this feedback and this question. I think that's very interesting. So I think what I can point on is not really like conflicting priorities or interests, rather, But what we often see is something that was missing in the system. So before we co-designed what we call community election plans, what we found out was that there was no existing election plan that was in place across all the cities that we were working in. So what we then did was to understand, so how best can we design, because there is nothing we can reference to for us to be able to do this work. And when you're looking in terms of, for example, the disaster risk management plans or strategies within the city authorities, they don't have these election plans in place, because most of the things, they are more of reaction to the hazard or to the event. And then we sort of want to do ahead of the disaster, and then there is nothing to reference on. So what we then did was to understand both from the communities and also from the other key stakeholders within the system, and trying to see what exactly is their ultimate goal as far as resilience to the climate change is concerned. And then you see that everyone is aimed to sort of reduce the loss and damage and ensuring the safety of residents, and also ensuring that life go as usual, even in the context where the disasters are increasing. So what we then did was then to bring these community election plans for them to strengthen their preparedness and then be able to achieve the common interest of reducing the loss and damage and ensuring that the safety within the communities. So we then work with both the communities and the local stakeholders to map the communities and then understand the hotspots, the hazard hotspots, for example, for flooding, where these hotspots, and then doing that community mapping helps them to have a common understanding of the risk at hand. So once you understand have the common understanding of the risk at hand and the hotspots, then we then co-design what are the actions that can be done ahead of the disaster for people to for ensuring safety of both the lives and also the livelihoods. And then having that common understanding and then the co-design process would then identify the key priorities both from the key stakeholders and also from the communities. And then those are the actions that we sort of co-design together. And then we come up with the community election plan. So everyone now understand both from the city authorities and other stakeholders and also from the community, they understand what they can do before, for example, floods happens. So I think basically at the end of the day, you realize that we reach a common interest and a common goal together, and then we design the actions that fit within both the city authority. For example, now they can be able to clean the drainage together with the communities, because it's one of the key actions they feel like it's a key period to them, and also the community feel that it's a key period to them. So we having those common priorities, both from the city authorities and other stakeholders, and also from the community, which brought together through the co-design process and identifying what is the key issue and what are the key outcomes they want to achieve. So probably I think that's how I can answer that one, where we sort of merge the priorities and also the interests there.
Okay. JJ, do you have your experiences in Resurgence seen any conflict or opposing interest from the stakeholders? Is there any example in particular in your projects?
One quite recent in Indonesia. I wouldn't say it's a conflict, but rather they have different priorities. So we're similar to the Philippines. We're also doing an initial scoping work, and what we've done in Indonesia is it took, obviously, engaging institutional actors takes time. And when we were doing the scoping, we were only given 6 months to kind of do an initial assessment of, of the country, to, 3 countries in Asia, to kind of assess, is there something that we can do? Obviously, that work is still, even though the report is done, we're still ongoing. But anyway, so because the institutional actors took time to even engage with us, and we found a delivery partner already, we then kind of made a decision to, okay, we have to start something. We did our own secondary research of what could be the areas that we could look at in Indonesia. And we specifically said on Jakarta, we had a long discussion because we're like, okay, there's so many other, projects, so many projects that are already ongoing. And maybe it would be interesting to look at other areas. And this was actually supported as well by the delivery partner, our partner who recommended 2 different types of communities that we can do the scoping, because it could give us a different kind of perspective about Indonesia. And so we were already doing that, but then obviously we started engaging with the Met services. But then we found out that they wanted Jakarta. So that it wasn't really a conflict, but kind of because now we've learned that they have a different priority. So we are now looking that as a kind of when we start a full implementation in Asia, we will definitely consider that, but more we have to engage with BMKG more in terms of, what could be, is there any, why Jakarta? Why, why cannot we do in other city? But at the same time, Jakarta was also on our list. It was just kind of because of the time, because of what the funder required, we had to also make a call. So I think that is something that even if you would always encounter, I think, in any project, particularly funders typically have a different priority and different way of looking at things. And then you have community partners who also have a different priority. So before we start engaging, we always look at, what are their priorities? If it's the institutional actor, who has the mandate? What are the current policies and laws that exist? And projects, in particular, if they have any big projects, to ensure that we can align with them, because then that gives them the decision, that gives them the opportunity to make a decision whether this project may not necessarily cost as much. It's not something that we have to create separately while we're also implementing other projects. So it's, I think, one way of trying to really align what we want to do and what other different actors in the system wants to do. So it's trying to understand where are they coming from, because maybe they're not yet ready now, but they may be ready after a few months. So it just depends on where they are coming from.
Okay. Thank you so much for that very comprehensive answer, JJ, on trying to make it work with our stakeholders, especially when we have such a limited time frame for accomplishing things.
Yes, I certainly agree, because the Darajo program made me realize that this is very inclusive and really caters to stakeholders of the community. So thank you for sharing that with your presentation. So
I do have another question. I believe we have this question on the chat box. This shall be a final question.
all
What additional measures should we consider to make disaster communication more accessible and effective for persons with disabilities? And how about for the senior citizens and pregnant women, for marginalized or minority sectors in general? How do we make disaster communication more accessible to them? That is the question from both John Guevara and Marilyn Medina.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, especially looking at it from our director work, where we always want to ensure inclusivity through the gender, equity, disability, and social inclusion thing. I think that's something that's very important. So I'll start with the context. So what we often do is to understand their needs first. So when we do, for example, our baselines or any other research that we do, what we do is to disaggregate our analysis based on the also looking in terms of gender, for example, age and disability, which I think is something that's very important because they often bring different experiences and also different needs. So we then understand what else can then be done based on what they are calling for. So we understand their ask through data disaggregation. And what we often do, even in the way that we collect data, is to have for example, the FGDs, the focus group discussions, are disaggregated based on gender and also based on disability, so that we capture the key voices of these particular groups of people and then understand their needs and their preferences. So that's what we often do. And often recently, what we have done is to strengthen different methodologies to be able to listen to their voices. And I can give you an example of the focus group discussion that we did, for example, in Indonesia recently. So what we did is to have dedicated focus group discussions or engagement with people living with disability together with their caregivers. And from there, we understand their needs and their preference. And what they are calling for example, now is that for television broadcast, they asking for in a language interpreter, a sign language interpreter who then help them to understand the focus information. And for those that have hearing impairments, they are also asking for audio focus dissemination, so that they be able to understand it. But mainly for those with hearing impairments, they are asking for clear visuals so that they can be able to understand the focus information. And those that are not able to see, they're asking for the audio, which are also disseminated in local languages. So it depends with the type of disability. So one thing that is very important is to understand their needs based on their different categories. And for women, for example, what they are asking for is that because they are also being engaged with the different, for example, household chores and other activities. So they are saying that, for example, if we disseminate the focus information through radio, there is a specific time segment that focus information being disseminated, but otherwise I'm not listening to the radio at that particular point of time. So if you share the focus information through SMSs, they can be able to even check and receive the focus at any point. So that's something that is very important when you are considering, for example, from the gender point of view, where you then utilize the multi-channel so that you'll be able to sort of address the needs of different categories of people. So I think basically that's how I can answer it for now, where you then understand the key preference and their needs, and you then design the system that's able to meet those different needs. So first, listen to them and be able to disseminate based on their preference and needs. Yeah.
JJ, do you have to add something?
Just something briefly, I guess, from a partnership perspective. Think if we want to make it more accessible and effective, so we have also started looking at when we engage with delivery partners, if they have that experience, because when it comes to doing, like the baseline, like building the evidence, if they don't have much experience, then it could also be difficult in terms of knowing what kind of questions should be asked. So it is now part of kind of like our assessment for when we're trying to do a new pilot in another city, in a new context. We try to, it's one of our criteria now. If obviously it will be helpful if they have more experience on it. And that's what we found actually in Indonesia, that our delivery partner has lots of experience when it comes to engaging it's like people with disabilities, from pregnant women, children, it's like senior citizens, looking after, it's like other vulnerable people. So it has helped us a lot in kind of adapting as well the evidence that we can show for the Raja, because when one of the partners has strong experience with it, then that helps us a lot in building as well, not just our capability, but the results and the evidence that we can show for the program.
Thank you, JJ. And I think this is a really good question to end on, especially since it's very important in making our disaster responses not just, of course, apply to a great majority of any society, any community, but also to those who are often forgotten or often marginalized because of disabilities, for example, or even just based on like a gender identity. That's an unfortunate reality, but it's great that we have initiatives like the Raja program that ensures that a disaster response is inclusive.
Yes, the key principles of the Daraja program is indeed very insightful for everyone. And participants, unfortunately, due to the interest of time, we will not be able to answer all of your questions. You may, however, send them to JJ and Joseph via their email address. Our chat support has just sent their contact details below.
In case you missed it from their presentations.
Now, as we end this session, we would like to request everyone to open your camera for a quick photo op. Our screenshotter Audrey will be taking our photos, so everyone please ready your smile.
So, good afternoon. So, we have 102 participants in 5 panels. So, for panel 1, then panel 2, then panel 3, then panel 4, then lastly for panel 5. So thank you. So back to you, FJ and SJ.
Okay, thank you, Audrey. And special thanks again to JJ and Joseph for their wonderful presentations, for taking their time and their knowledge with us this afternoon. And for our audience, please don't leave yet. We still have one last question, one last chance to win by Dr. Lagmay and Maria Criselda Baldago.
Okay, as always, this webinar has been brought to you by the UP Resilience Institute, NOAA Center. We would also like to thank our partners once again for this episode.
Ako Klima Incorporated,
Angat Kalikasan Pilipinas,
APS UPLB,
AGGEF,
AVESS,
Ateneo Institute of Sustainability,
Biology Society, LPU Laguna,
HERM SLSU,
Communities for Resilience Incorporated,
Puyang Foundation Incorporated,
Earth Island Institute PH,
Ecolaya Environmental Advocates,
ESSC,
Future Earth Philippines,
UP Jogso,
Go Parsu,
Greenpeace Philippines,
Mapua Malayan Colleges Laguna,
United Architects of the Philippines,
UPHES,
UPRI Youth Mappers,
UPHSP STOP,
UPLB INREM,
Yakap NCR,
and UNESCO International Geoscience Program. Before we go to our closing segment, here is our final question for today's anniversary special. Please follow the instructions on the screen. Do not type the answer. Do not type the letter of your chosen answer. Please wait for Ella Santiago to type now. Okay?
Participants, this is your last chance. From episode 8 about local disaster resilience practices featuring Dr. 𝗍𝙍𝗲𝗏, what are the traditional climate resilient infrastructures in Batanes known as? Letter A, Ivatan stone houses. Letter B, nature-based solutions. Letter C, stilt and raised houses. Or letter D, geoheritage sites. Okay?
Okay. Let's wait for Ella Santiago to type now. Okay. We'll be reading the first happy third under the message of Ella Santiago. And we have Hadassah Grace Pesilier. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Please,
Yes.
you may unmute yourself. What are the traditional climate resilient infrastructures in Batanes known as?
Ivatan stone houses.
Is it
Ivatan stone houses. Is it correct, FJ?
I feel like it's flood control projects. I'm joking. I'm joking. Let's find out. Yes.
The answer is letter A, Ivatan stone houses. Congratulations to our last winner, Hadassah Grace Pesilier. You will receive a signed copy of Dr. Mahar Lagmay and Maria Criselda Baldagos' A Timeline of Mindanao Disaster. While there are only 3 prize winners for today, each of you has contributed to the success of this program through your participation, enthusiasm, and continued support. So, thank you very much, participants, for being with us every step of the way.
And if giving us your support is not enough, you might want to collaborate with us. You may reach us via the UP NOAA Facebook page, or you may email us at resilience.institute@up.edu.ph or info@noaa.up.edu.ph. You can also catch this episode and previous ones on our YouTube channel.
Yes, and before we officially close this afternoon's webinar, you may now answer our episode evaluation form to receive your certificate of attendance. The link to the form can be found in the chat box below, or you can just scan the QR code flashed on the screen.
Yes, this link will only be open for 24 hours. After this period, the form will be closed and we won't be able to issue any certificates by then. So please make sure to answer as soon as possible. And thank you for understanding.
Now, lastly, mark your calendars for October as Resilience Live returns for its 24th episode.
Watch out for our announcements on our Facebook page regarding the next speaker and our featured topic.
Once again, thank you to our guests, Joseph and JJ.
And thank you to you, our participants for today for this 3rd anniversary episode. Once again, I'm FJ.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
We will keep the Zoom meeting for 5 minutes to give time for answering the evaluation form.
Through the local
The webinar will close in 5, 4, 3, 2,